بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وأفضل الصلاة وتم التسليم على سيدنا محمد خاتم النبيين وإمام المرسلين وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد, السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. I hope you're all well. First and foremost, I'd like to congratulate everybody on the entry and the coming of Ramadan, and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it a good Ramadan for us, a better one than the previous year. And Allah gives us the opportunity to make kind of a reformation of character in this month, and try our best to use the month to better instill a sense of kind of connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the remaining 11 months before we reach the next Ramadan. Today, inshallah ta'ala, we're looking at line number 20 and line number 21, inshallah. The Shaykh says, Rahmullah ta'ala wa nafa'na bi ulumihi. He says, وَرَاعِهَا وَهِيَ فِي الْأَعْمَالِ سَائِمَةٌ وَإِنْ هِيَ اسْتَحْلَتِ الْمَرْءَ فَلَا تُصِمِ. Keep a watchful eye on it as it grazes in the fields of actions, and if it finds a pasture too delightful, do not let it graze unchecked. This particular line is actually quite difficult, because the author could have meant, the poet Imam Busiri, the Nazim, may have meant several things by his statement here, but we'll break it down as in accordance to what the majority of commentators have understood by it. And I want to look at this idea firstly of ra'iha, and then wahiya fil a'mali sa'imatun. We have this word ra'iha, that keep a watchful eye. Ra'a in Arabic with ra'in ya is a word in reference to watching over or keeping a close look at something. For instance, a shepherd is known as a ra'in, is known as those words are used for him. And the Messenger of God alayhi salatu wasalam also used these words in a particular hadith. But before I come to that, the hadith that I want to talk about in a little bit of detail, I want to mention another hadith of the Messenger of God alayhi salatu wasalam. And Ibn Maqlash, in his commentary on this line, attempts to he uses a few hadith, but he first sets the tone for the line. And he writes that there are many ropes that are within a human being, within the nafs, that the devil kind of uses to pull the nafs or pull one towards him. And he starts with a particular hadith, short hadith, and I want to talk firstly about that, inshallah ta'ala. And that hadith is, Abu Isa Tirmidhi narrates the hadith from Abdullah ibn Mas'ud. There is a fihi kalam, there is a discussion about the hadith, but there are several different variants of this hadith, and there are some of those variants are sahih. That the Messenger of God, anna Rasulullah alayhi salatu wasalam, qala, inna lish-shaytani lammatan bibni adama falil-maliki lammatan فأما لمة الشيطان فإيعاد بالشر وتكذيب بالخير أما لمة الملك فإيعاد بالخير والتصديق به فمن وجد ذلك فليعلم أنه من الله وليحمد الله جل وعلا ومن وجد الآخر فليتأوذ بالله من الشيطان. Very interesting concept and idea that the hadith indicates that the beginning of the hadith states that indeed the devil, the shaitan, and some of the commentators, Mullah Ali Qari states it's not specifically the devil only, but he says wajundu, the devil and his those who cooperate with him, meaning his helpers. This month of Ramadan, for instance, people assume that the devil Iblis is locked up in this month, but there is a khilaf on that, on what that actual hadith means. That because the word Iblis is not in the narration, that does it mean that the shaitan Iblis himself is locked up in this month? Or does it mean the shayateen are locked up? Or does it mean more so that because of the nature of the month, that the shayateen have very little effect on the mu'min? On the first point, there is a khilaf. Some of the ulama state that the shayateen collectively are all locked away. Some state that this includes Iblis, some state it doesn't include Iblis. There's a khilaf on that issue. So that's one idea. The second is, of course, true either way. The fact that the kind of one's propensity or one's the effect of evil is lessened in this month. Why? Because the nature of the time management, the way that we view the month, the fact that we're fasting and all the other things related to it, even stop a lot of waswasa that's built up, or human behavior slightly changes in this month. So that's true either way. The general idea is that shayateen are locked away. However, the effect is still there, of course, because if you've had 11 months or years and years of effect of shayateen, it's very difficult to eliminate that in a few days and then just to be a completely different person. So the effect of that will remain. And this is what the Messenger of God mentioned. He said, Inna li shaitan lamma bibni Adam, that the devil has a lamma, has an effect on the son of Adam, meaning there's some effect that the devil has on him. Walil maliki lamma, also angelic forces also have an effect. Angelic forces also have an effect on one. So we have the effect of the devil and the angelic effect as well. Although the word Malik is mentioned here, meaning angel. It could be more angels, it could be a number of angels. There's a famous hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that a human being is allotted a number of angels. For instance, there's an angel that sits on one's lips that collects salawat and takes them to the Messenger of God ﷺ. So you have different forms of angels constantly around us. So it could be a number of angels. But in the other hadith of Qareen, for instance, an angel is referenced there as well. The same kind of idea that there's this angel when a human being is created, or born rather, an angel is allotted to them, as well as a Qareen or satanic force. وَأَمَّا لَمَّةُ الشَّيْطَانِ, what is this kind of effect that the devil has on, or this satanic whispering? Mullah al-Qari actually says that this lamma here means waswasa, which is interesting. That this effect that's been discussed here is waswasa. Because the devil, he doesn't physically harm you, meaning he doesn't come into your life and throw you about and break your bones, or doesn't do any of that. In fact, the general position I take on mas, the Quran, is waswasa. فَإِعَادٌ بِالشَّرِّ وَتَكْذِيبٌ بِالْخَيْرِ. What he does, he threatens with evil, وَتَكْذِيبٌ بِالْخَيْرِ, and he rejects good. These are the things that the shaitan puts into the human being. Again, the commentators state, shar here, evil, can mean from kufar all the way to sins, etc. وَأَمَّا لَمَّةُ الْمَلِكِ, how does the angel affect us? فَإِعَادٌ بِالْخَيْرِ وَتَصْدِيقٌ, in one narration bihi, or another narration وَتَصْدِيقُ بِالْحَقِّ, that it brings one to good, or it promises good, it promises one good. The first meaning actually the first point can mean that one of the things that the devil does, the waswasa does, is that the waswasa says or tells you that if you do X, Y, and Z, your outcome will be really bad. So it pushes you in the way of haram, i.e. that haram is the only kind of solution to your problem. There's a verse for that in the Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "Ash-shaytanu ya'idukum al-faqra wa ya'murukum bil-fahsha'i." That the devil, ya'idukum al-faqra, again, he kind of tells you, oh, you're going to become poor. There's an inference to many things. He threatens one with poverty, that if you don't do this, you're going to become poor. And similarly, you could argue that our general behavior as human beings often will do things that are impermissible, but we think that we're solving an issue by doing them. We're thinking, well, what choice was I left? What choice was left to me? I had to do it. That's just the way it is. So Allah says that He threatens one with faqr, meaning with poverty, وَيَأْمُرُكُمْ بِالْفَحْشَاءِ, and He pushes you to do that which is fahsha. Can include many things, indecencies, anything that goes against hududullah, against the limits of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But the angel, on the other hand, he gives you news of good things, or he promises you goodness, khair. He promises you that you will, if you do this, then God has this in store for you. If you're patient, then there'll be a faraj, there'll be an opening at the end of it. وَتَصْدِيقٌ بِالْحَقِّ, and He also affirms the truth within you, or pushes you to the truth. And many of the ulama, Mullah al-Qari also mentions here that this is in relation to belief of the unseen, belief in Allah, belief in the unseen. The Shaykh then, the Prophet then said, فَمَنْ وَجَدَ ذَلِكَ, if one sees this, فَلْيَعْلَمْ أَنَّهُ مِنَ Allah, that it's from Allah. Meaning, if, and I'll kind of explain the hadith this way. If you have a certain thought in your mind, and this is a kind of an advice of how to deal with waswasa, measure it in accordance to the following. As a believer, if you have a waswasa and you hate that waswasa, it's something that feels bad and you dislike it, but you can't stop it from entering your mind. It occupies you. That's a telltale sign. The fact that you dislike it is a telltale sign that it's from the devil. As the Messenger of God said, istafti qalbak, give a ruling to your own heart. So just because you imagine something or think of something, or something occurs to you, even if it's blasphemous, for instance, does not necessarily mean that it's you generating that, especially if you dislike it. If you dislike it and you feel that, oh, this is something I really don't like, but I can't stop it kind of entering my mind, that's a test from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's something that every human being goes through. And the job of one is to kind of deal with that. But that's not from you, that's from the waswasa of shayateen. If, however, something comes into your mind and you see it as praiseworthy and you see it as something good, then often that's from angelic forces. And that's what the hadith is stating, that if it's something from khair and you understand that and you recognize that, then know that's from God and thank God. But but if you see the former, فَلْيَتَعَوَّذْ بِاللَّهِ مِنَ الشَّيْطَانِ, then make ta'awudh, say أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم, seek refuge with Allah from the devil. I.e., it's almost the job of the devil to put these whispers into one's mind, regardless of how horrific and bad they are, these thoughts, etc. Remember, thoughts are generated from a number of things. It could be childhood experiences, what we've seen in our lives, trauma. Collectively, all those things produce a different imagery. And the devil plays on that and tries to convince one that this is who you are, this is what you are. But in fact, we know that the opposite is actually true. The Shaykh says, فَالِاعْتِمَادُ عَلَى الْعَمَلِ فَقْرٌ بَلْ لَا يَزَالُ الْإِنسَانُ فِي الْأَعْمَالِ مُفْتَقِرْ إِلَى ذِي الْعَظَمَةِ وَالْجَلَالِ وَلَا يَرَى لِنَفْسِهِ حَظًّا فَصَارَتْ رُؤْيَةُ الْعَمَلِ مِنْ عَمَلِ الشَّيْطَانِ. قال تعالى, and then he mentions the verse, وَلَا يَطَّلِعُ عَلَى لَمَّتَيْنِ وَيُمَيِّزُ الْخَوَاتِرَ إِلَّا مُتَشَوِّفًا إلى ذلك تشوف العطشان إلى الماء وقد بسطت القول في الشعب الكبير. Now, there's a hadith of the Messenger of God عليه الصلاة والسلام, again mentioning this word, this idea, وَرَائِهَا وَهِيَ فِي الْأَعْمَالِ صَائِمَةٌ, that meaning observe it, take a really good, every time one does something, as Busiri said, ra'iha, keep a close eye on the lower self, But even if you're in a good place, just make sure you're observant and vigilant, meaning keep a watchful eye as it grazes the fields of actions. Now, why did he say the fields of action, fil a'mali? Because the nafs often deludes us. So we may be doing good deeds, but we have to keep a close eye on why we're doing those good deeds. Ikhlasun niyyah is very, very important there. what's the reason for that, and what's the reason behind that. I want to mention the hadith of the Prophet where he uses the same word. It's a famous hadith of the Messenger of God والسلام, and I want to kind of unpack that hadith with Ibn Attar's commentary. The Messenger of God والسلام, said, إن الحلال بين وإن الحرام بين وبينهما مشتبهات لا يعلمهن كثير من الناس. The Messenger of God said, indeed halal is bayin, is absolutely clear, halal mahad yani. وإن الحرام بين, and the impermissible is also clear. وبينهما مشتبهات لا يعلمهن كثير من الناس, and between halal and haram there are things that not very many people know, meaning there are things that are ambiguous, obscure, or doubtful, you could say, and not many people know them, meaning these are things that are known by the ulama. Now, in terms of haram, there are not that many things that are outright haram. Allah mentions many of them in the Quran, or whatever few they are. Khamr is haram, for instance, drinking wine. Zina is haram, for instance. Eating pork, swine is haram. Things of that kind are clear, but there are not that many things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has prohibited. And that's why the Messenger of God said between the halal and the haram, there's this grey area. فَمَنِ اتَّقَى الشُّبُهَاتِ, he who kind of tries to avoid that which his mind falls into doubt about, فَقَدْ اسْتَبْرَأَ لِدِينِهِ وَعِرْضِهِ, he has freed himself, or protected himself, or protected his religion rather, and his dignity. Because why? Remember, that doubtful matter may very well be permissible, but because you don't know, it very well may be impermissible. Because you didn't know, because qillatul ilm, you lack knowledge in that, or you're just confused about it, you don't have access to ulama, etc. The Prophet ﷺ said, وَمَنْ وَقَعَ فِي الشُّبُهَاتِ وَقَعَ فِي الْحَرَامِ, that the meaning to this is that one who falls or constantly is engaged in things that are doubtful, he or she doesn't know if they're allowed or not allowed, sooner or later you're going to fall into haram. That's the nature of it. If you're in a kind of a pool of doubt, then, and you're just carrying on with it, you're saying, look, it's doubtful, but I'm just going to carry on doing it, I'm not sure. Then sooner or later you're going to come upon something that's going to be impermissible. The Prophet ﷺ then mentioned this word, كَرَّاعِي يَرْعَى حَوْلَ الْهِمَةِ. He mentions a shepherd, the same word. It's like a shepherd. He takes his flock to graze or to pasture. And the land that he takes them to has a border, as a hima. Hima is hama yahmi in Arabic, means to protect. So the hima, the idea of hima, is something that you put up to protect something from another thing. I.e., in your garden, you put up a hima, a fence. It protects the neighbors getting in, or whatever else you're trying to keep out. That what he does is he takes his sheep to pasture, and he takes them very, very close to a line that's drawn. Maybe it's somebody else's land on the other side. He takes them very close to the edge or to the border. Yushiku an yarta'a fi, or yaka'a fi in another narration. It's very possible that they're going to eat or consume the food, or they're going to go over into somebody else's land, and no longer does it remain permissible now because they'll be grazing on somebody else's land. The Messenger of God gave this as an example because it was common amongst the Arabs. It was something that they all understood. They understood that many of them were shepherds. They would take out the animals to pasture, and they would know, wait there, to keep them away from that part of the land because it's somebody else's possibly. But for us, it would be something like the limits. Like, we know that we're pushing the limit here, that we're very, very close to falling into something impermissible. Take, for instance, a relationship with somebody that's not like a premarital relationship. That, you converse for the intention of getting married, etc., and you get to know certain things, but then you know that there is a hima here, there is a limit here, and I'm getting very close to this border, and where the waters become muddied and it becomes a very grey area, and that's what the Messenger of God is talking about. Ala wa inna himallahi maharimuhu. What are these? What are what are the himallah? Meaning, what is the boundary or the border that God sets? And the Messenger of God said that this line for God is maharimuhu, is the things that He has made haram, meaning that's the line. Then the Messenger of God continues and says, "Ala wa inna fil jasadi mudgha," and in the body there's an organ. If it's sound, then the whole body is sound, and if it's corrupt, the whole body is corrupt. Know that it is the heart. Now, Ibn Attar, for instance, Nawawi's student, mentions this idea of dignity and how keeping away from doubtful matters often will save one either way. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions a verse in the Quran related to this, which I'll touch on a bit later, which includes the next line and this line. I want to move on now to the second part, where the Shaykh states, rahimullah ta'ala, وَإِنْ هِيَ اسْتَحْلَتِ الْمَرْأَ فَلَا تُسِمِ. And if it finds pasture too delightful, do not let it graze unchecked. That there's a whole discussion in the commentaries about this one point, and it's very interesting that the nafs naturally, the lower, you could say an-nafs amara bis-su, meaning the lower self, it always kind of gravitates and is pulled towards that which is impermissible. Why? Because it finds the most delight there. So let's give an example of it. Think about like talking about other people. Talking about other people is something that backbiting, meaning backbiting is a loose term in English. It doesn't fulfill the entire idea. But talking negatively about other people, such that if they were to hear it, they wouldn't like it or displease them, and there's no benefit in you saying it. That, interestingly, is something that the nafs pulls towards. Gossip, for instance. And people who have more free time on their hands tend to gossip more. Gossip now has a new kind of veneer. It's moved over to the digital kind of sphere. So one of the pieces of advice that is generally for spirituality now, with digital spirituality, is that people should not, under any circumstances, be commenting on the internet. On Facebook, should never be engaging in commenting. Why? What benefit are you bringing about, except you're probably part of a greater fitna. Yeah, you're almost pulled towards, oh, I have to say something. You don't have to say anything, actually. Better that you don't say anything. The messenger, there's a statement that of some of the Salihin, in kana kalamin fidda fasakutu dhahab, that if a speech is made out of silver, then silence is golden. But what you'll inevitably fall into in commenting and going back and forth sooner or later is some form of saying something bad about somebody. It's the first time in history that an unprecedented time where you can backbite completely on your own, meaning you can sit at home and be typing away and you're making ghibah. So the point here, is that the lower self is always attracted to those types of things. Take things that are haram, like zina. The nafs is inclined towards that with the lower self because it pulls towards that idea. And what the Shaykh is saying, that as soon as the nafs begins to feel a bit of pleasure, you must check it. You must see if where it's being pulled towards, because naturally it's going to pull that way. Now, their debate is, how do you differentiate between good and bad then? If the nafs can't naturally, or the lower self is always going to pull you towards bad. And they say, look, there's two things here. The ulama say there's a sharia. Ibn Ashur, for instance, comments on that everything that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has ordered upon you to engage in is for your own benefit. So you'll find your manfa'ah there. And the next line will talk about this idea of many things that we think of to be good are bad, but many things that we think are bad are often good. That's one. Number two, the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, he's a paragon of mercy and the paragon of perfection. So whatever the Messenger of God engages in, always be ainihi mamduh, it's always going to be good. So that's another indication. And then the third one is that you take the universals from the religion, the kind of universal statements of the Prophet and of the Quran, the kind of maqasid, you could call them, the higher objectives, and whatever, as long as they're fulfilled, meaning general ideas of benefit and general rules of harm, then go with that. And when you fall into doubtful matters, go by what the hadith mentions. In the next line, the messenger, Imam Busiri states in the next line, كم حسنت لذة للمرء قاتلة من حيث لم يدري أن السم في الدسم. And Sama, the meaning of it بمعنى طلب وشراء السلعة, to look to طلب شراء السلعة, to seek to buy something or purchase something. Yeah. And Allah mentions the same word, يَسُومُونَكُمْ سُوءَ الْعَذَابِ. And later another verse from Masamani Dahru. Now, this is a very interesting line. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Quran. I want to touch on this line only a little bit. Not too much, but because we have around 20 minutes to spend on it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about this idea of our understanding of good and evil. Allah says, كُتِبَ عَلَيْكُمُ الْقِتَالُ وَهُوَ كَرْهٌ لَكُمْ وَعَسَىٰ أَن تَكْرَهُوا شَيْءًا وَهُوَ خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ وَعَسَىٰ أَن يُحِبُّوا شَيْءًا وَهُوَ شَرٌ لَكُمْ وَاللَّهُ يَعْلَمُ وَأَنْتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. Now this is a verse in Surah Al-Baqarah. Although the verse about jihad, but Tahir ibn Ashur, the great Mufassir, mentions in his commentary of this that there's a general understanding of this verse. So first up, let's look at the verse. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala states, كُتِبَ عَلَيْكُمُ الْقِتَالُ, that war, not war, but rather qital meaning fighting, and you can, that has its legal interpretations, has been made mandatory for you. And this is to take away the idea of cowardice from people. If somebody, a country were to attack the country that we live in, then it would be, we'd be obligated to defend our land and to defend our homes and defend our people here, and the inhabitants of this country. And that's from courage. And some people, of course, they lack courage when these issues take place, when these things affairs take place. Allah says, "Kutiba alaykum al-qital," that this is something that's been prescribed for you. That we don't just believe in passivity. Like, we're not just passive people. There are times where you have to defend your land. There are times where you do have to defend your home. Although it's not something that's sought after, the Messenger of God said, you should never want to meet your enemy in battle, meaning that war is to be avoided by all costs. But sometimes war exists and takes place, and Allah is talking about that. And Allah says, and you dislike it. Something that you dislike, meaning there are people with cowardice in them. Now Allah mentions after that a general statement. There's a rule about the Quran that in al-ibrata لِعُمُومِ الْأَلْفَاظِ لَا لِخُصُوصِ السَّبَبِ. That when we look at the Quran, the ibrah, the lesson that we take from the book of Allah and the verses of that Allah mentions is the generality of the statement. It's not restricted to why it was revealed. And what we mean by that is, think about all the surahs in the Quran. They had reasons for revelation, particular reasons, but it is not restricted to that, i.e. we can use them in our lives as well. There are many meanings that we can take, and because it's Kalamullah, the word of God, it has an infinite number of meanings, meaning the ulama will always be deriving new meanings from the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's not mughlaq in that sense. The meanings are like oceans. So we can take a generality of the meaning here. And Ibn Ashur mentions that many people are ghafil of this principle here, meaning they're negligent. And what's that principle? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَعَسَىٰ أَن تَكْرَهُوا شَيْئًا وَهُوَ خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ وَعَسَىٰ أَن تُحِبُّوا شَيْئًا وَهُوَ شَرٌ لَكُمْ. That it may well be that it's not necessarily the case, if we take it generally, that you hate a thing, وَهُوَ خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ, but that thing's good for you. You may dislike it, but it's good for you. And it may be that you like a thing, but it's bad for you. And Allah says, وَاللَّهُ يَعْلَمُ وَأَنْتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. And God knows the reality of the affair, and you don't. It's as simple as that. Now, if you take that verse and look at this statement of Busiri, كم حسنت لذة للمرء قاتلة من حيث لم يدري أن السم في الدسم, how often a pleasure that is in fact deadly has seemed good to one who does not know there may be poison in the fat. Now, I want to bring in Ibn Ajiba here. Ibn Ajiba mentioned some interesting things here, which I quite liked. So I want to mention some ahadith and things that he mentions. Ibn Ajiba writes the following in his commentary, that it is possible that an ignorant person is beguiled and overcome by his ego and his cravings and goaded to consume the poisonous fat and thereby unknowingly succumb to destruction. I mean, the ignorant person. The same may be said with regard to sins and acts of disobedience. You have come to know that the primary causes of sin are those things which are pleasurable to human nature and desirable to the lower self, whose taste is the sweet as honey, whose effects and ill consequences are that of poison. Therefore, the intelligent person who is granted enabling grace is he who, when presented with honey infused with poison, is not fooled and deluded by its sweetness, and who instead turns away from it and does not pay attention to it, since he is intelligent and understands that the honey will destroy him because it will produce intense pain and agony. There's a hadith of the Messenger of God, alayhi salatu. I'm going to mention a few hadith here, where the companions were talking about a man, they were praising him. And they were praising his dhaka, his intelligence. The fact that he was an abkari, he was an intelligent man. And so the Messenger of God comes in and he says, what are you talking about? And they said, we're talking about so-and-so, there's a certain man. We're talking about his great intelligence. And the Messenger of God said, does he mention death? Does he mention the temporality of existence here in the world? They said, la. The Messenger of God said, he's not as you say he is. Meaning even the idea of intelligence, who is intelligent, who is ignorant, is very important here. Intelligence has many different kind of layers, of course, but the ultimate intelligence is its realization of the self, the realization of who we are and what we're here to do. So he quotes a hadith Ibn Ajiba, and it's a wonderful hadith, which is mentioned by Imam Muslim and Imam Ahmad, that the Messenger of God alayhi salatu wasalam said, paradise is surrounded by distasteful things. Paradise is surrounded by distasteful things. That our life in this world, think about it, to get into paradise, we have to go through so many kind of trials and tribulations, or we have to do that often which we don't like to do. And the Messenger of God said paradise is surrounded by that, while hellfire is surrounded by desires. And in another hadith, and I'll comment a little bit on this hadith as well, that the Messenger of God said, on the day of resurrection, a man who was the most affluent of people, meaning he had a lot of wealth, of the world, will be brought forth and dipped into the hellfire for a single moment. Then he will be asked, did you experience any pleasure? Meaning in the dunya. He will say, no, by Allah, I never experienced it. Then a man who was the most downtrodden person in the world will be brought forth and dipped into paradise for only a single moment. Then he will be asked, did you ever experience any hardship? He will say, no, by Allah, I didn't. And on this hadith, I'll expand on what the hadith means. For anybody who suffered trauma in this world, any form of trauma, any form of pain, on the day of judgment, there's different variations of this hadith. That person will be brought in front of Allah and dipped into, some say he's dipped into a pond that's in Jannah. And when he comes out of that, when she comes out of that, it's the Messenger of God said, alayhi salatu wasalam, he's asked or she's asked, do you remember any of that pain you suffered in the dunya? And they say it's completely gone. Bear in mind that forgetting and nisyan is a mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That when we forget things, we often say, oh, you know, I wish I could remember everything. Well, actually, nisyan is a rahmah. Think about living with the pain of every single memory of every event that took place in our past, having to relive that every moment of our lives, meaning that memory will never ever go away. So it's a rahmah from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we're caused to forget certain things. It's true that the byproduct of that is sometimes we forget good things as well. That's for sure. But generally speaking, nisyan is there for a reason. It's there to kind of remove certain pains from us. And a byproduct of that often is that we forget good things sometimes. But things like forgetting Quran can always be revived and things of that nature. So forgetfulness and nisyan often is a mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When we forget good things, that's from the devil, that's from shaitan, we ascribe it to him, as has been mentioned in Surah Yusuf for that. Similarly, this affluent man who lived a life of dunya, and only of dunya, not for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he's taken on the day of judgment and God dips him into something. But here in the hellfire, maybe a pond in the hellfire, and God says, where's all that pleasure of the dunya now? And he said, I can't remember anything, any pleasure that I had in the dunya. Meaning that's a reality of the temporal pleasure and pain of the world. That in the hereafter, every pleasure that we succumb to in the world and every pain that we are inflicted by, in the akhirah, all of it will disappear. The pleasure and the pain. And it will be a new slate and a new form of pleasure. And also a new form of pain. So it just wasn't worth it that temporal pleasure of haram wasn't worth it, because in the akhirah, what benefit is there for it? You don't even remember it. The point is, the memory of it has even disappeared. Now, he mentions another point, al-Busiri, rahimahullah ta'ala. Another hotly debated line amongst the commentaries, min haythu lam yadri anna summa fi dasami. To one who does not know there is poison. Yep, as-sum. In the fat, fi dasam. Now, here, interestingly, Kharbuti has an entry here. And he talks about how this part here is very possibly in reference to riya, ostentation and showing off. We've talked a lot about that already. That that in when we do things, we don't know publicly. And even Ajiba talks about this and states that almost all pious deeds are for secret. Very few of them have to manifest themselves in the public eye. That if you look at almost all of piety, it's in secret. It's your closed dua, your closed ibadah, your closed relationship, your dhikr and your adhkar with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He said, how much of it is actually public, or should it be public? And the more of it that becomes public, the more problems there are. And Kharbuti writes that very possibly that when we're talking about the fat here, the fat, it's these, we're talking about these deeds that, because fat, the Arabs love to consume fat. They loved that part of the animal. And it was a kind of a delight for them, a luxurious part of the animal that they all enjoyed. So it's delightful to the heart and to the nafs. But he's writing that the poison actually exists, and that in consuming it, you'll end up dying. And Kharbuti writes that the action that you're performing publicly in front of people, it may not come to you, but it's maybe full of riya, full of ostentation, and ostentation will completely spoil the act. It's the poison within the act that will destroy it, and your acts will not be accepted. Very interestingly, in the Maliki school, for instance, it's not a sunnah mu'akkada, as far as I'm aware, to pray the tarawih, for instance, in the masjid. It's sunnah but not mu'akkada. Hanafis have it as mu'akkada. They say as long as some people are doing it in the masjid, not everybody has to go. And some of the ulama actually mentioned that, because if you're at home and you pray, there's less chance of riya. And of course, because now it's such a public prayer, because of the Hanafi rule, of course, over many lands, and the prayer became a really big thing. Now that's kind of taken away to some degree. But other actions, of course, we should be very, very careful. I mentioned last week and the week before that we do them in front of anybody, or we infer them in front of anybody. In fact, we should keep them under lock and key and never mention them, in fact, lest we get to a point where we've protected ourselves and then we reveal them, and then all our actions are spoiled. Okay, shall we stop there for today? Allah alaykum. Let this month be month of Quran for everybody. Let us all take benefit from this month. We're only on the first fast today, or for some people the second. So let's, with these classes, we'll just keep reminding ourselves that to get back on the horse and inshallah benefit from the Quran. inshallah. قولوا قولي هذا واستغفر لي ولكم واتوب اليه وسائر المسلمين. السلام عليكم ورحمه الله وبركاته.